Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with ants climbing a tree glass noodles. That's right, this recipe is a lot more than just a very catchy, slightly disconcerting name, since it's beautiful, very easy, and extremely delicious. And I'm pretty sure if you give it a try, it's going to be your new favorite noodle dish. And to get started, we're going to soak some glass noodles in some cold fresh water. And it's critically important that the ones we're using are made from mung beans, and not ones made from rice or tapioca. Right, those are going to look almost identical, but the texture is going to be totally different. Oh, and I should mention there's probably going to be some potato starch in there, but mung beans should be the main ingredient. And what we'll do after kind of pulling those apart and making sure they're submerged is let them sit in this water for 10 minutes so they have a chance to partially hydrate before we add them to our sauce. And while that's happening, we can start working on the rest of the dish. And that's going to start by breaking up and browning some ground pork and some vegetable oil set over medium-high heat. And as usual, how small you break up your pieces of meat is going to be up to you. But keep in mind, the dish is called Ants Climbing a Tree. So I guess we're shooting for something close to the size of an ant. And please, nobody ask which ant, since I know they come in different sizes. But anyway, it really doesn't matter, since at no point is any part of this dish really going to look like ants climbing a tree. And then what we'll do once we do have that crumbled to our desired size is let it continue cooking and browning for about a minute or two, just so it takes on a little bit of color and gets a little more savory. So I cook mine stirring for another couple minutes, or until it looked a little something like this. And once it does, we can add the next set of ingredients, which will include some finely minced garlic and ginger, as well as a nice big spoon of Chinese spicy fermented bean sauce, which is made with fermented soybeans and salted chilies, or at least this one was. And these can range from mild to insanely hot and spicy, and the one I'm using was kind of right in the middle. And what we'll do is cook that stirring for about a minute, just to take the raw edge off those aromatics, and give us time to make sure each one of those pork crumbles is coated with the goodness. And once that's been accomplished, I'm going to toss in a little bit of Szechuan pepper, plus a little bit of white sugar, and we will cook that stirring for another 30 seconds or so. And the reason I'm adding the sugar towards the end of this step is because I don't want it to start to caramelize and get too dark, which is going to change the flavor profile. Although having said that, that might be really good, and I'll have to try that someday. But anyway, after giving that a brief saute, we will stop and add the wet ingredients, which includes a little splash of soy sauce, plus a couple cups of chicken broth, or pork broth if you have it, which you don't. And what we'll do is give that a stir and raise our heat to high, and we'll wait for this to start boiling before we add our noodles, which, as you know, we're soaking for 10 minutes in that cold fresh water. And after 10 minutes, they're not going to be super soft, but they are going to be much more flexible and probably look like this. And that's it, one soaked. We'll transfer that into a strainer and let it drain very well. At which point, assuming our sauce has come to a boil, we can move into final production, which means transferring our glass noodles in, along with a nice handful of freshly sliced green onions. And what we'll do is take our tongs and cook this stirring for only like 2 minutes, which after that 10-minute soak is really all we're going to need. Right, we don't want these noodles to get soft and starchy. Okay, what we're going for is something that's just barely tender and still a little bit firm with a very pleasant chewiness. So while you're doing this, feel free to pull one out and give it a test. And the first time you work with these glass noodles, you're going to think you have way too much liquid, but you don't. As you'll see, these noodles are going to continue to soak up the sauce, and by the time we're eating, it's going to be perfect. And that's it. After cooking this stirring for a couple minutes, I gave it a final test and determined it was exactly where I wanted it to be. So I transferred that into a bowl, and then finished up by garnishing with some more freshly sliced green onions. And in just the couple minutes it took to serve this up, and garnish the top, and grab a fork and spoon, those noodles somehow, someway, had soaked in almost all the juices, which is why this needs to be fairly juicy when you pull it off the stove. And that, my friends, bizarre names aside, is just a magnificent noodle dish. Right, the taste is very rich, very spicy, and extremely savory. And when you combine that with the totally unique texture of the glass noodle, it is a combination that's going to have you craving more. Plus, the appearance of these noodles is just so enticing and so beautiful since they really do get almost see-through and very glass-like. So we basically checked all the boxes here, as it looks good, tastes good, and feels good. And of course, if you're into it, you could toss in some seasonal vegetables or some greens, or maybe some mushrooms. I mean, you guys are after all the ants of whether to add other things to enhance. But typically this is a very simple dish, so we do want to be careful not to overcomplicate things. But whether you add other ingredients or make this as shown, it is a truly amazing noodle dish with a great name, and I really do hope you give it a try soon. So please follow the links below for the ingredient amounts, a printable written recipe, and much more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.